Hello, everybody, and you are very welcome to Successful Perspectives. Successful Perspectives, of course, is when we deep dive into the topic of leadership with a leader from our very selective network, and that is Boardroom by EMIR. And for this episode and for this Successful Perspectives conversation, I'm delighted to be joined by Shahid Kazi, who is the Group CEO at ValueStrat. Shahid, always wonderful to see you, and you're very welcome on Successful Perspectives.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Likewise, it's always a pleasure to see you.
So I've had the pleasure of getting to know you a little bit through our network over the years. And I'm always curious. I use these conversations, if I'm really honest, I use these conversations as like a free leadership consultancy for me. That was genuinely one of the ideas of coming up with these Successful Perspectives. And I've admired the success that you and your organization have had here in the region and indeed further afield. And I'm curious about you as an individual. So let's go back a little bit. Let's go back kind of to the start of your career, or even before that, if you feel, your formative years. And now you're the group CEO of this successful organization. But when you think back to your earlier years in life, and were there any specific events, issues, anything that happened that you feel now, with the benefit of retrospect, you can look back and say, you know, maybe that shaped who I am, of course, and therefore my leadership philosophy and the central tenets of my leadership style?
Thank you. If I look back at my life, I think I wouldn't say that there was one specific event or a moment where I look back and say, yeah, this is really what shaped me. But it's been more of a gradual learning process, but indeed from an early stage. And I think a lot of it had to do with my family ethos and the training and the values instilled by parents. And that has come a long way with me, and I've realized how much it has benefited me. Because if I look at my leadership style, or at least the kind of aspects that I really like to focus on in my leadership, there are two main aspects, or cornerstones, you might say, that I like to do my best at and implement. And the first of which is the emotional intelligence part. You know, the whole EI and EQ bit, which I believe is the most important aspect for successful leadership. And a very important subset of that is empathy. Because if you look at really what is the primal task of leadership, you know, the prime task of leadership is really to have the ability to inspire and move people with a compelling vision, right? So if you have emotional intelligence, if you have empathy, then what it essentially becomes is friendliness with a purpose, right? Moving people in the right direction. And if you're socially skilled, and I think socially skilled leaders then tend to have a much higher resonance with their team, with the stakeholders, which helps them drive towards achieving their goals and objectives. So for this particular part, if I look back at my life, it has been a constant evolution, but I think starting from my student days and even at the early corporate days, I feel it had a lot to do with my family ethos and the values instilled by parents. So I'm eternally grateful to them for it. You know, all the way from having a sense of purpose in anything, being considerate, being empathetic, trying to get into other people's shoes, integrity, being kind, being genuinely concerned about others. I think that has really helped me, because I think once you develop that skill set, you know, you can be able to deal with a variety of people within your organization and outside, and be able to act accordingly and do the relationship management, which is really where it gets you to implement your goals and vision in a much better way. In fact, I'd go one step further and say that it's extremely important, now that I look back at it, that we do make an extra effort with our children and our students to teach them about emotional intelligence and EQ at a very early stage if we really want them to be good leaders. The second aspect, or the second cornerstone of my leadership style that I try to implement is essentially empowerment. I'm a big believer in the fact that good leaders are those that create more leaders and not just more followers. And I think that aspect of it came, I would say, a bit later in my life. And that the early days at ValueStrat, I would say, really helped me implement that, because I had to grow the business, grow the team, and to be able to find the right people for the right job, especially the senior management, and then enable them and empower them to run their own show while holding on to the core values that you have established as a leader is extremely important. To be able to let go and let them lead as well. And that brings diversity, that brings a wider perspective to the organization. And especially in a business like ours, which is consulting, independent advice, strategy consulting, financial advisory, all of that requires, it's a people's business, and you really can't grow your business till you have really good people under you who are leaders in their own right. So that aspect of it, I think I would say I learned later and tried to implement it to the best of my ability.
And you mentioned there, you touched on, going back into your earlier years. Think back to when you were starting out in your career, and you think about the position you're in today. Were there any misconceptions, preconceptions about what leadership was actually about, what it's about to be a CEO when you think back, and what's some of the difference when you now are in the reality of that position?
I think one preconception I always had when I used to look up to the leaders in the earlier organizations that I worked for, and even otherwise, was that when you become a senior leader or a CEO of an organization, you would really need to be very, very tough and very dominating, maybe even harsh or say ruthless at times, because different situations can come in. And that, in all honesty, used to worry me, because I realized that that's not me. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that. And then I realized, and it was a pleasant surprise, actually, it was something different from what I'd expected, that not really. I could be who I was. I could still be kind and considerate and still have my vision and my objectives achieved. Even if I did have to be stern or strict on a particular area or with any situation, it could still be done empathetically. It could be still done very civilly, in a civil manner. And I think that really gave me the confidence to move on further and say, listen, you can adapt to your own style. You don't have to be in a certain way. And that was, I think, in a way, a misconception I had earlier, and that got clarified. And a couple of things. One thing that I think I was right about, which again I talked earlier, was the empowerment part. The part about creating more leaders. I had that feeling that this is what would need to be done if you are in a senior leadership position. And I think that I think I was correct about. And a lot of effort. I always say this, that you should hire people better than yourself, right? At least for that specific job or that division that you are hiring them for. I think a lot of times people feel insecure in doing that. There's a general tendency in the corporate world that, if somebody below you is actually better than you, you feel insecure and want to try and sort of marginalize them. But I think if you let go of that and you feel that, and you kind of realize that, no, they will actually be good for the firm or for the organization, I think that really helped. And I think makes life a lot easier as well.
What do you feel is the toughest part of being a leader? And what's your favorite part when what fills you up with joy when you get that little dopamine rush in work?
Sure. I think the toughest part, as Spider-Man eloquently says, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So I think the toughest part is the responsibility, because when you are leading an organization, you are the group CEO or whatever, everything is your responsibility. And if things are going right, then it's great, obviously. But if things go wrong, whether in a small way or in a big way, it does come on your shoulders. And that could keep you awake at night. And because it could be anywhere from, if you're a conscientious person, you're always thinking about, are the employees happy? Are they being fairly dealt with? Are my clients happy? Are they being served well? All the other support stuff, the legal matters, the regulatory compliance, so many different facets of it that are your responsibility. And obviously, you've down delegated a lot, you've empowered a lot, so you can't be fully aware of everything. So that's something, I think that's the tough part. The good part and the favorite part is clearly the satisfaction of adding value, right? The ability to impact people's lives positively, because you have power, you have resources, and it's up to you how you want to use them. And I think so, all the way from being able to provide employment, try and make a good organizational culture so your employees are happy. When I look at every employee in the organization, I look at not just that person, but a whole family behind it, right? And if you can create happiness or value addition for them, the impact is far reaching. Whatever product or service you're offering in your company obviously has an impact. You're creating value for society, you're making life better for somebody or the other. And then onwards to many other things. You could, take initiatives, social initiatives and so forth. So I think that's the favorite part about it.
You mentioned there, and I think it's such a valuable point in terms of, and it was interesting, it was the first train of thought you had in terms of the responsibility. Am I creating an environment for my staff where they're happy and they can thrive, etc.? How are you guys managing that now in terms of building a company culture in a modern workplace, but also a workplace that is, we're very much post-COVID now, but it is increasingly remote. And this is a question as much for me as it will be for our viewers. What's your thoughts on that? What can we do about it?
No, absolutely. I think as we are moving to an increasingly sort of remote workplace, my thoughts on that are, goes without saying that we have to remain even more connected if you want to create a good culture. And personally speaking, for me, it's been a hybrid model, I think is the best, where you give flexibility. So what we've done is all our division heads are empowered to decide who within their division, whether themselves as well as their team members, needs to come to office regularly, 9 to 5, 9 to 6, depending on the job, who can do it 3 days a week, who can work from home completely, depending upon what works best, right? And to give that flexibility, because we've seen some people are very productive when they're working from home, others are much more productive when they are at office. But I think, so that's one thing. So keep it flexible. And I think let's not go overboard with cutting costs on office space, right? I think that became a big motivation to begin with. Oh, this is great, let's just let go of half our office space and save all the costs. But I think there's a long-term benefit that you are losing out on when you are avoiding people to come to office. And I think there are certain aspects about professional life and personal life. There's no replacement for physical meetings. So I think we're trying to do our best to keep a good combination where people are working from home or from office, but are still connected, visiting office frequently enough. I think engaging in team building activities, both inside and outside of the office, is extremely important. And I know things have become remote and so forth, but in the same way, the tools of remaining connected have become more as well, right? I mean, look at how we're using video calls and all this so easily now. And just pre-COVID, we never did that. So I think while we might be remote in certain aspects, we can be really more connected in many other ways. And lastly, I think what I realized during COVID, and we've tried to do that post-COVID as well, and I highly recommend that. During COVID, there was a huge combination of professional and personal challenge. right? Professionally, you still had to run your business despite the lockdowns and all of that. And then on a personal front, we were all in a very strained situation with health issues or potential health issues and family members getting affected and so forth. So we were keeping in touch with other staff members and so forth as to how it's going on and so forth. And I think that aspect needs to continue post-COVID as well, right? To be aware of not just the professional situation of your staff, but their personal situations. Really get to know where they are, what issues they might have, what personal challenges at their home or at their family they might have, and then adapt accordingly. So that's, I think, how a good culture can still be created to make the most of both worlds, I think.
Thanks for sharing some of your leadership wisdom with me. It's useful for me. I want to get better at this, so I really appreciate it. And it will be of great value to our viewers as well. So thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Trevor. It's been my pleasure talking to you as always.